as a vision and a strategy for cultural change.
Can you expand on that? Because some of the listeners might be hearing this. And for those of you who just tuned in, welcome to the Safeopedia podcast. We're in the throes of a conversation with Malcolm Staves. Malcolm is the Global Vice President of Health and Safety at L'Oreal. And so congratulations on that one. But
thank you, Tamara.
Jumping back into what we were talking about benchmark for cultural change, let's unpack that a little bit. What do you share with our audience what you're meaning?
I think a lot of people talk about culture is important, and it takes a while to do it. But like with any kind of change of anything, you need a strategy, you need a vision to transform the culture from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. And I talk to a lot of companies, and they talk about culture as if it's just a word. They don't necessarily have the vision of where they want to go with the culture and how they're actually going to lead their organization and transform their organization in order to get that cultural change. For example, if you're a company that is very much into just doing a risk, let's do the minimum regulatory compliance, and you have a vision at the end of the day, you want a culture which is more of, I am my brother's keeper. Everybody's looking after themselves, whether it be management, employees, contractors. Well, it just doesn't happen because you click your fingers and say that's what we want, and it doesn't happen through a single training. It happens through a vision which translates into a strategy of how you're going to put it in place. And as we've discussed in the past, in L'Oreal, for example, once we've got the basics of risk management in place, we now look at transforming our culture, local culture at a site level, into, okay, now how do you get it to transform from EH&S is driven by EH&S to EH&S is now driven by the line manager supported by EH&S? So what are the tools and the methods you need to put in place, and what's the time frame to do that? It's not just a one-shot training. And then after that, how do you get more and more employee engagement? And you do that through having programs that promote employee engagement and employee consultation, etc. And so you then transform from EH&S is driven by my boss with EH&S support to EH&S is that plus direct employee engagement, directly people being involved. And then finally, after that, the end of it is everybody looks after each other, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can challenge somebody else without being recrimination, without being shouted at. There's a no blame. We've developed a no blame culture, etc. And how do you get there? It just doesn't do it because you write it in a policy or a document. You need programs. So you need to know where you are, where you want to be, and you need a strategy to deliver what that future state is.
And would I be correct in saying that when you're mature also, it's not just about leadership, thinking up programs and driving them. It's actually employees bringing ideas to the table about initiatives as well.
It is, but you have to be ready for that, Tamara. For example, if you are asking for information, for ideas from employees, and management are doing nothing about it, then there is zero credibility for the management. So you first got to get your management driving safety, get them on board before you can successfully, in my opinion, go to that next step of really saying to the employees, we want your ideas, we want your eyes on the shop floor. And then behind that, visible felt leadership, because the management take it on board and they look at the action and they put action items in place and they deliver on these ideas. Because I agree with you, great ideas, but if you are constantly say, I have one idea, I give it to my boss, nothing. Second idea, give it to my boss, nothing. Third idea, no, I won't bother anymore because my boss never does anything. So you've got to get the culture right in order to really sort of like make sure that whatever you're trying to achieve is sustainable going forward.
And culture, just to break that open, culture is our values and our beliefs in the ways that we do things.
Correct.
Right. So
without a doubt,
as you said, it's not a policy. as, you know, you can write as many policies as you want, but that's not culture.
No, it's
Culture is
not.
the way that people are thinking and engaging,
It is. And
spoken and
culture's
unspoken.
totally and utterly. And but depending on where you are on that culture journey, if you're a site that doesn't care about safety, that just sees people as being assets to be used, right? And there are still companies like that out there, don't get me wrong, right? That all they care about is the bottom line, the profitability, etc. They don't do the risk assessments and everything that they need to do. Then that company doesn't care about maybe these kind of beliefs and all the rest of it. They just want productivity. And the first thing a company like that very often goes through is it becomes conscious that health and safety is important, whether it be for legal reasons, regulatory reasons, they've had a fatal accident or something like that. And very often those kind of, at that stage, the first thing they have to do is put in the risk systems. You've got to manage, the first thing you have to do, a health and safety professional or a company, is identify the risks and put them under control. And even more so, those risks whereby you can actually have a fatality, you can actually kill somebody at work. So it's all about putting everything in the right position in that journey. And it's great to try and you were going towards talking about something about, you know, psychological safety, being able to, you know, get involved and speaking your mind, etc. But, you know, not all organizations are like that, you know.
No,
and
it's not even about psychological safety. I think it's about at the bottom on the site floor, adults want to be treated as adults, Malcolm.
Yes.
Right. And so I'm going to spice it up a little bit here from my own personal experience, because everybody knows how I love to do that, is being on a site floor. I know that you're an executive in the executive suite. And one thing I do love about how you lead is that you come onto the site floor and you're actually talking to the employees and engaging with them, which is really great. However, not all of us have that experience. A lot of people have, where the executives come down in an entourage. They're, you know, they've got the managers who want to make their career vulturing around them, right? And the employees don't even get to speak to somebody who is a global vice president. And then they kind of wonder, well, what does a global vice president do other than just kind of walk around on our floor and stare at us like we're zoo animals, right? And so there's a lot of the places in the world, there's a disconnect. So how can we close the gap on that? Like, how have you at L'Oreal done that to close the gap?
I think the way we've closed the gap within L'Oreal is we're quite centralized in our approach. Okay, so we have corporate tools and methods, whether it be our people-based safety programs, our risk assessment programs, and because we consider human life as the same value no matter where it is in the world. And we also, I also personally believe that if you have an international standard, that's a really good standard, right? And it protects people, the risk, etc., then you apply it worldwide. End of story, right? And a lot of companies don't do that even down today. When we look at some international companies, they follow local legislation, right? Which, if you ask me, that's just all about cost. It's not about people. It's not about people putting people first. But going back to the type of organizations so that's easy for me to do. L'Oreal's a big organization. I know small to medium-sized companies, SMEs, that don't have that kind of luxury. They don't have that kind of mindset, etc. And that's again where I think companies like the L'Oreal or the big corporate responsible companies should be trying to impact their supply chain as well, right? To try and make a difference, because every single life matters. But it's not a perfect world, and you will always have those kind of companies that just don't get it, because the senior leadership doesn't get it. It just wants to drive on productivity or profitability or whatever. I mean, I'm privileged to be working in a company whereby people are really at the center, and I don't have any limitations directly on where I go, what I do, etc. On the other hand, sometimes the big bosses say, well, this is the way things are going to be. The business is going to go in this direction, and I have to adapt and be flexible. So I think it's a difficult question that you ask, because some countries don't have the same level of value of human people, of human beings, of life, that other countries do, right? And that can impact the way that regulations are imposed on the country, or even described in that country. And yes, you're right. Going back to the thing, so people are not, adults, they're adults, right? But you can make that argument, well, they're adults, therefore they can look after themselves. They have to be responsible. They have homes to go to, people to look after. Yet why do these people still get killed? Why do these people still get accidents? Because the biggest risk at work is the human being.
Yeah, and other human beings around you.
And other human beings. So sometimes you need to put the rules in place, because you need to try and manage that degree of risk taking, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you Tamara, you probably don't always stick. You might do actually stick to the speed limit. Right. Human nature knows you can get away with 10% faster than the speed limit, and we're bound by time, right?
Yeah.
We always want to do things quicker. So let me get there 2 minutes, 5 minutes quicker. Let me break the speed limit, because it's justification. Now, if you then had no rules at all in the workplace, then I think it could be a disaster. But you really need to identify the rules for where it matters, whereby if things went wrong, you could end up killing somebody or having an irreversible accident. That's the way I think on it. So in L'Oreal, and I make no excuses for it, when it comes to irreversible accidents, fatalities, we are top down globally. Yeah. With procedures.
I like what you were saying also before about consulting, safety consulting, the management, the workers, etc. Can you break that open a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually, within our system, I'm going to say we actually almost forced this to happen through our culture journey. So when we do our risk assessments, we actually monitor that 90% of our employees are involved in risk assessments on a 3-year basis. Okay. When we have our line management behavioral-based safety program, or I don't like behavioral-based safety, but people-based safety program, which is line management, going on the shop floor, talking to people, we make sure that they involve people, and there's a feedback, there's a discussion, etc. We then have a program called SIOs, which stands for Safety Improvement Opportunities, which is using the eyes of people to identify opportunities for improvement in health and safety, or accidents waiting to happen. Just nothing's happened yet, not even a first aid case, not even a near miss, nothing's happened. And that is the way that we try and do that. But we actually almost force it in, depending on where you are, to be honest with you. And I'm not ashamed to say that. But what it does do, it starts to lead people on a risk searching culture change. It transforms the way individuals see and identify risk in the workplace, because at the end of the day, they're on their own. They're not with me, they're not with the boss. So you need them to see risk in a different way. And that we can apply whether it's Indonesia, China, Brazil, America. So we get people to see risk differently, and hopefully when they see the risk, they'll react correctly against the risk. And that will help us having, for the more mature sites, less restrictive rules of how to control things, still having the rules for the most important things, but yet a site that doesn't have that same kind of maturity of health and safety culture or risk searching culture, we still need to put in place those kind of things and drive it home with KPIs. And honestly, I would say I've headed up health and safety for 14 years in L'Oreal. We're not there yet, but I do see the benefit of having this kind of approach with this kind of vision.
Yeah, no, I like what you're talking about, like that having employees and the site managers being more knowledgeable about risk assessment and being able to bring that up. You know, when I was working at Metro, because I'm a social worker, that is very much what I brought in, is like, well, you guys are in the bakery. So you're in the bakery for 8 hours a day. If you're seeing something, you know, bring it up and let's talk about it. And it's incredible when you do push that, because at first people were taken aback because I was the safety person. So I should be coming in there and searching out like I'm on a treasure hunt for the risks and stuff. But when they saw that they actually would bring something to me and then I would push forward to get it rectified or find a solution, more things started to come out, more reporting, more ideas. And not as in like, oh, we have this problem, fix it, but even like, you know, in our bakery, we had women who had to wear, I think it's called hijab,
Yeah.
right over the head. And they were having a problem with it falling into the mixer when they were doing it, which is very dangerous, right? And so I remember them coming and saying, you know, can we get a change of uniform so we can tuck it under when we're working, right? So they already saw the solution in the store. They knew what the risk was and their problem, and they had seen a solution. I was like, well, have you seen something in the store already? And they were like, yeah, actually the chef's coats would be great because they have a collar that comes right up. And so it wasn't even about purchasing anything, Malcolm. It
No,
was
that's
just
incredible.
about going in and saying, hey, we need 3 chef's coats. Okay, here you go. And the risk was mitigated,
Yep. And
right?
just think if you could have a, I'm going to say, a strategy to take that idea at that one site and make it applicable to every single site in the world that was under your responsibility,
Yeah,
and which is what we try to do in L'Oreal, right? And I think it's vital to listen to the people. It's vital to give them feedback. Sometimes you may turn around and say, well, thank you very much for the idea. We've looked at it. We've worked together. We're not going to do anything, right?
yeah, yeah,
Or it's a good idea, but and we've adapted it because we think we can manage the risk in a different way. But thank you very much. And it's very important to develop that kind of two-way conversation. But the culture has to be ready
yeah.
in order to do it. And then the thing, as I've just said, is how do you then take that idea of what you were just saying and how do you globalize it?
Yeah. And just for audience listening, like I think what Malcolm is saying is if you're not going to be doing it, if you're not going to be executing it, go back and communicate that and communicate the why. Don't just let people hang in silence, because I think that's what's really has impacted negatively in the safety professionals world, is not going back and communicating that like we have followed up, we have looked into this, and we've made this decision because of our findings, right?
Oh, totally is. But that for me, if I can, is, you know, there are 3 things that are important. One of the things within any company it should be is visible, felt leadership. Visible, felt means that when your employee comes up with an idea, you feed back. It has to be part of your DNA. Those companies that don't feed back to the employee, they're on the left side on the culture curve, to be honest with you, Tamara. So, you know, they've started to go too far too soon. They haven't got the line management driving visible, felt leadership, right? And in our roadmap, we drive in after risk management is visible, felt leadership. And that has an impact on the employees. It has an impact on lots of things. But if you try and jump too soon to getting ideas from your employees and your managers are not doing anything about it, your system will fail. That's my experience.
So I want to just for our audience kind of break it open a little bit more about what you were talking about before about transforming the culture. You
Yep.
said that so you want to look at where you are today and then think about where you want to be Where do you want to go? So if somebody is in the audience listening and saying, well, that's really great, but can you help me kind of figure out how I would do that? Can you put some recommendations for people who are listening that so they can maybe try to apply that?
Yep, I can give my experience, okay, and what I've used. Since 1997, I've been a great fan of the DuPont Bradley curve. It's been my true north, my guiding star for all the companies that I've worked for, and it's not just been L'Oreal. And that takes a company from reactive through dependent, independent to interdependent culture states. Now, you can go other places and see different ones, but the one that I've chosen, and also we've chosen in L'Oreal, is the DuPont Bradley curve, which we've modified to suit us. Okay. Now, within that, we've actually developed a culture audit program that's our own, that places you on that Bradley curve, so you know where you are. And based on where you are, you can identify what are the next steps in the next 12 months or the next 3 years that I need to be doing. So you have this step-by-step approach to developing the culture. But the first thing is to identify where you are. Some companies go and identify where they are based on, they buy something off the shelf and there are companies out there that actually sell those kind of things and provide that kind of service. We decided it was much more powerful, that it was built by L'Oreal for L'Oreal and implemented by L'Oreal. And within that, our tools are in there. Now, all our tools were developed with 3 things in mind. What is the role of the management? What is the role of the employee, the non-manager? What is the role of the EH&S professional within that? Okay, and what is the criteria for success? So every single tool we have in place has been looked at like that, and every single tool has its own leading KPIs, right? Leading indicators. We don't focus on the outputs. The output is the result of the quality of what we put in place, right? So in a nutshell, to go back and really answer your question, first off, you need to identify what your vision is in the future state. You need a tool to identify where you are at the moment, and there are several tools out there. We just happen to have our own. And then you need to decide, okay, in that transformation, and the DuPont Bradley curve is a very good one, how do I go from where I am to, I don't know, line management being more and more visible and driving safety, to getting my employees involved, to getting everybody involved because I am my brother's keeper, and we start to export our culture into our families and into the local communities, etc. There's no silver bullet though, I'll tell you that, and it's lots of hard work, and it's a long game. It is not the short game. And unfortunately, a lot of health and safety people out there are probably under pressure for 20, 30% reduction in lost time rates, etc., by the senior management. And I'll be honest with you, we haven't really focused on that, as it's just an output. We've focused on the other stuff, and we get the improvement that's required. Because at the end of the day, sorry, Tamara, going back to what you said as well, you need to get to a state whereby people see risk, they act to the risk, and they look to protect themselves. Yeah. And then you need to make sure as a management team that you have the big risk whereby you're going to kill somebody, have an irreversible accident or a serious illness under control, identified and under control.
Absolutely. Now, I want to go back to also when we were talking about culture, right? And you're talking about how to lead to get that change. I think this is a very important piece, Malcolm, because I have seen in companies where a CEO will get up there and talk about the vision about what they'd like their culture to be, and then they go off stage and you don't hear anything about it after that. So share with us your experience about how can you lead to get that change?
Okay, and I'll look at it firstly from an EH&S professional's point of view. Okay, somebody that's in my position, somebody that's in the EH&S senior EH&S person in a factory or another type of site. You can't expect everybody to see safety and health and well-being like you. That's the first thing. And in most of the companies where I've worked, I've seen CEOs say the right thing, but it's been words. The only time that I've really had a CEO that I believe has openly spoke about health and safety and meant it and driven the business model as a result was somebody was when I was with Alcan. And he was an ex-manufacturing person, right? So he'd lived through it, he'd underseen the risks, he'd seen fatalities, etc. And he drove it. The rest of them, I think we're lucky if we have somebody that really drives it and just doesn't say things. I think health and safety in these situations is middle up, middle down. In some companies that I've worked for, I've targeted the future leaders. I've targeted the young line managers, knowing that in 3 years' time, they're going to be a factory manager or they're going to be even more senior. And hopefully you change the culture, because when they get there, safety is part of the job. They understand everything. And it's part of that cultural change. But you know, when a CEO that really doesn't believe it and speaks once a year about safety, everybody knows. However, when you're working on a shop floor as an operator, for example, in a factory, the guy who's 5, 6, 7, 8 levels above you in the organization has less of an impact than maybe your line manager and your factory manager. So you need to see them change as well. So it's not a perfect answer because it depends on individual companies. In L'Oreal, we drive it through training, we drive it through audits, we drive it through tools, etc. that we've been lucky enough to put in place. But for most organizations where I've worked, and I've worked for 10 companies, health and safety has been more middle up, middle down. And those people that say it's top down, when I actually get into the companies and have a look at them, the majority of the time, it's just words. I'll be honest with you.
I'm glad that you said that. It's not just top down.
No.
There's more to that. I think that's another discussion that we're going to break open and have. I like that you brought in to get people to think about that leadership pipeline. The leadership pipeline is something that's not often talked about, and I don't even think some people even know what we're talking about. So you're going to have to tune in because we'll talk about that. And of course, I want to bring into the discussion about managing our groups, the group dynamics, because that's something else that really feeds into culture, but we are limited for time. And I do know that you're going to be talking at the EH&S Congress in September. And for those of you who are listening, that's going to be in Berlin between the 13th and the 14th. And Malcolm, you're speaking there. So can you share a little bit about what you might be talking about?
I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff we've already just mentioned, but a little bit more detail about the transformation of our health and safety culture within L'Oreal. What's the roadmap? What's the approach? Why it's the long game, but also why we've embarked on an approach of we build things ourselves and we deploy things ourselves. We bring people in to help us at the right time to develop things for our own internal use. It's gonna rock the boat a little bit, you know, Tamara, as online. But I think there's a message out there, because I think there's a lot of people out there that think they can go buy something. Health and safety professionals think they can go out there and buy something off the shelf. And it might work because it's new for a couple of years, but if it's not fitted to the culture, you're not putting in at the right time on your culture journey, you don't have the right maturity, it will fail. And I can say that by experience, right? I've done that kind of stuff back in 2000, 2002, 2003. And these things failed. I bought off the shelf, right? They failed after a couple of years. And it put me on a different path about, you know, designing things internally, using our internal expertise, built for the company that I work for. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail of that, and hopefully gives everybody out there a few golden nuggets that they can go home with and do something with them.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Malcolm. This has been amazing.
It's been, honestly, Tamara, it's always a pleasure, and thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you. So those of you who are listening, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed our conversation, click the like button. If you want to get notifications about more great conversations, hit the subscribe. And if you're looking for a great conference to hear Malcolm be speaking at and you happen to be in Berlin, check out the EH&S Congress between the September the 13th and the 14th. And hey, if you're looking for great safety content to share out with your network and your teams, go to safeopedia.com. And join us October 18th to the 20th for our own Safety Connect, which Malcolm, you're going to be joining us there too, aren't you?
Oh, completely. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's probably one of the big events that's on my calendar that I want to attend every year. Mainly because I can choose what I want to see, and I can pick up some really interesting stuff that I can take back to L'Oreal, etc., and use. If I can add just a couple of things, if you don't mind, very quickly. Anybody wants to reach out who's listening in, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very open. I believe sharing is caring, and if there's anything that's of interest, I'll just send you our guide to how we put in health and safety, etc. Just reach out, and it's good to connect. It's good to share.
Thank you, Malcolm. And I'm also going to put your details on the page,
okay,
so people can catch it there too, right? But yeah, hit him up on LinkedIn. Malcolm loves to network and chat. So thank you again, everybody. Until next time, stay safe.